Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Fishtails lecture, where we will learn about estuaries and the Research Reserve Program that will bring national attention to the Bay of Green Bay and the proposed natural area within the city of Sturgeon Bay. That includes properties within Crossroads, the Door County Land Trust Ship Canal property, and the DNR properties around Strawberry Creek. My name is Mark Holy, and Fishtails is an educational outreach program of Crossroads at Big Creek presented in concert and partnership with the Door County Library, where we present the science of Great Lakes fisheries. And I'm looking forward to hearing Emily Tyner, our speaker tonight, share with us how science of the Research Reserve Program will enhance our ability to care for the precious aquatic resources of the Bay and Green Bay and Door County. This is the third of four lectures for this season. Our last lecture will be on April 11th, when Dr. Karen Murchie, who happens to be sitting right over here, from the Shed Aquarium will present Suckers on the Move, what we've learned from tagging and tracking. I just learned from she gave me a little tidbit here. I should just learn from Dr. Murchie that of the suckers that she implanted acoustic tags into last year, 2 years ago, about half of them are already staging in Purvis Lagoon, waiting for that cue, the appropriate cue to trigger their movement up Samuelson Creek to spawn. You will not want to miss Karen Murchie's presentation on April 11th. And the Door County Library has developed a recording playlist of the 14 previous fish lectures. And you can find that list with the topics and so on that you can, and how to access them on the table in the back. If you run out, just let us know and we'll make some more copies. Crossroads at Big Creek acknowledges the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of this region, having ancient, historical, and spiritual connections to the land our preserves now encompass, and the land and water Crossroads at Big Creek now stewards. It is my pleasure to introduce Emily Tyner, who is the Director of Freshwater Strategy at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, a position that she has held since 2020. In this role, Emily is the state lead on the designation of the new National Estuarine Research Reserve for the Bay of Green Bay. Upon designation, the Bay of Green Bay NERR will join the Lake Superior NERR in representing Wisconsin in the National Reserve System that will encompass, it only encompasses 30 right now, but it will encompass 31 sites across 1.4 million acres of the coastal United States. Emily received her bachelor degree from Smith College in Massachusetts. She currently is working to complete her PhD from the UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences, where she also received her master's degree. Emily has extensive experience in informal water education, developing and managing citizen science programs, and teaching and practicing science communications. Skills that were cultivated by her previous experience from 5 field seasons at the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, a year with the Fulbright U.S. Student Program Fellowship in Africa, and as a communication intern with the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. Give a warm welcome to Emily Tyner.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for having me. Just by show of hands, who's heard me talk about the NERR designation before? Okay, a few people. So I'll do some background, but also provide some new information too for those who've heard it before. This is exciting for the region, for Sturgeon Bay, for Door County, and I'm happy to be here. So I'll talk about what the NERR system is. This is a national system. I'll share a bit of where we are on the progress to designation. We are not a designated site yet, but we are on our way there. Opportunities and programs that will come with designation, what that might mean for Door County and for the region, and then what our immediate next steps are in the next few weeks and months, our environmental impact statement and the management plan. So a bit about the system, and if you've heard this before, apologies for the repeating, but the national system, so these reserves are state-national partnerships with the emphasis on state. These are non-regulatory, place-based partnerships with a focus on research and education, stewardship and training around our nation's waters, coasts, estuaries, and wetland areas. And if you don't know, an estuary is where a large river meets a larger body of water. So the whole of the Bay of Green Bay is a freshwater estuary. Classically, like Chesapeake Bay is an estuary. We like to say that the Green Bay system is the largest freshwater estuary in the world. Although I was in Lake Superior last week at the St. Louis River Summit, and they say the same thing. So it's a bit of a battle, but in this company, we'll say it's the Green Bay system because it's a huge system. So these sites you can see on the map. This is a 40-year federal state program. The first one was designated in South Slough in California. There's one on Lake Erie at Old Woman Creek near Sandusky, Ohio. That's a 40-year-old reserve. And then as Mark mentioned in the introduction, there's one on Lake Superior on the St. Louis River estuary system, and that's a 14-year-old designation. So we here in the Green Bay system are officially on the map in red, which is exciting. This is a map that NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, shares with elected officials, with other government agencies, so it's cool to be on the map, and we're on our way to designation. Right in front of us is the state of Louisiana. They will likely be designated this year, and our goal is to be designated in 2025. This system has a phrase that I like a lot, and I bring it to almost all my presentations about the reserves. And it's locally relevant, nationally significant. So each of these reserves is very place-based. It's locally situated in a local ecosystem and habitat, and it's there to address local ecosystem challenges. So for our system broadly, for a Bay of Green Bay NERR, that could be challenges like harmful algal blooms and the impact on swimmable, fishable, recreational waterways. It might be things like flooding and how fluctuating water levels in the Great Lakes impact coastline and shoreline infrastructure and docks and beaches. It could be things like emerging contaminants and the impact of PFAS potentially on our waterways and our drinking water. Climate change impacts. There is a long list of impacts I could think of that we could address with the reserve system, with our local reserve. But by being part of a system and having connections to all of these sites across the US, we can bring to bear expertise and knowledge and research from other systems going through similar challenges. So for example, harmful algal blooms, really HABs, an issue in Green Bay, blue-green algae. That is also now an issue on Lake Superior and Lake Erie. So there's lessons that we can learn and share across these systems. Also, I hope that being part of this reserve system elevates the story of Green Bay. I see that Val Klump, a mentor of mine, gave us a Fishtails talk a few months ago, or maybe last year. And one thing he says about Green Bay, and I think this is really interesting, is that, and maybe he said it to this audience, that the Green Bay ecosystem, so the bay and the Sturgeon Bay and all the associated part of the watershed, is a large enough system that all the processes you see, the biogeochemical, the physical processes, you'd find them in any large water body. But because of the kind of scale and geographic borders, you can manage and study Green Bay in a way that there's really unique lessons to be learned. So that this kind of uniqueness of habitat, but also with lots of similar ecosystem features, can help tell other water system stories. And I think that's a really cool thing, and we want to elevate that kind of profile of Green Bay to a national level. I mean, Dr. Murchie's research, there's lots of such cool fisheries work happening, and we just want to tell that story. So we hope to attract national and international attention for researchers and educators to the Green Bay system. This reserve, although it's going to be physically located in the waters of Green Bay, the Wisconsin waters, will be representing the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron biogeographic region. So Huron and Michigan are functionally one lake. And that means that lessons learned through the Reserve Research Program, programs that we offer, will have implications and can be applied to other estuary systems across Lake Michigan and Huron. Although the state of Michigan is putting in an application now to have a NERR on the west side of the state, so the east side of Lake Michigan, along all the rivers and tributaries along the Michigan's coastline. So that's exciting to have potentially another Great Lakes reserve. Oh, one thing I didn't mention is I did say this, it's a non-regulatory designation. I've really tried to lean into that. There's no change in how people access lands and waters included, no change to hunting or fishing or commercial boat traffic. This is, hands-off regulatory-wise. It's about education and research. That's, I think, important also for everyone to know. We are right now working on drafting our first mission and vision and goals and priority objectives. And so I'm just going to share with you, I'll read from the slide here. This is our draft mission for what we hope the NERR is, so you just understand our thinking on this. To celebrate and advance community interests, opportunities, investments, and connections to the region's globally significant and unique freshwater resource through innovative and collaborative research, education, stewardship, and outreach activities that restore and sustain healthy, resilient, and working estuaries. And the celebrate is a big part of that for me. One goal we've had with this designation is that we take a holistic approach to thinking about how communities and people interact with the waterway. So this is a program that's really built, the science is built in. It's dedicated science programming that we'll bring to the region because of it. And that's great and important, but we also are trying to think about all the other ways that people connect with water. To kind of promote water and to have people value the Green Bay system, you have to have a connection with it. And we know that the science and the fisheries, although a big thing for Mark and others, isn't maybe how everyone connects with our waterways. So we're trying to advance like storytelling, the artistic components, spiritual connections, and emotional connections that people have with water. I'm starting to do some of that now with programming, and we want to advance that further when we're up and running as a reserve. Thinking about all these ways that people interact with and live on and appreciate the water. So that's our draft mission. It's still being workshopped a bit, but that's where we're headed. So a NERR is really three things. It is natural areas, and I will speak to that in a second, and that's what Mark spoke to. These are the places where we do long-term research, where you bring students and school groups for education programming, for kayaking and walking and bird watching. And those are they have boundaries on those places. It's programs, the programmatic footprint, that is not bound by any natural area boundary. The programmatic footprint is quite large, kind of the Green Bay watershed broadly into the state of Michigan, into the UP. And then there is going to be some built infrastructure, a visitor and education center. And I know that there has been a lot of interest in that. That's going to be our kind of post-designation thinking, is to work on that for some kind of variety of reasons that both tied to NOAA and locally, but that will be part of it, is this built infrastructure. So I'm going to speak to the natural areas first, and then I'll speak to the programs after that. I started this work in fall of 2020, and it took a 2-year deliberative process, lots of involvement from folks across the region who helped us eventually, and through criteria and 3 different committees, public meetings, we settled on 3 natural area components. The thinking here is that we wanted to have sites, these natural area sites, that could represent a huge, geographically large ecosystem with lots of diverse habitats. There was 2 important gradients, ecological gradients, that were guiding the decision to eventually select these sites. One was a restoration gradient. You're probably aware the Great Lakes, and especially the Green Bay ecosystem, have gone through tremendous restoration investment, in the last 20, 30 years. The Great Lakes Legacy Act, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, now the infrastructure bills, tremendous work to clean up the lower bay, the Green Bay area of concern, The Fox River cleanup, which was a $1.2 billion effort, the largest river cleanup in the world. That's a significant story we want to tell and highlight. The Menominee River in Marinette, that was recently delisted as an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, area of concern. So there's been tremendous restoration. So we wanted to kind of tell that story as part of the storytelling and elevating the story of Green Bay. Restoration's a big part of that, and there's a lot of success and lessons that we can share with other estuaries across the US from what we've learned here in the system. So we are looking to capture what we call the restoration gradient, sites that are kind of some that are pristine, unchannelized river mouths that have lots of natural features without marinas or harbors or built infrastructure, all the way down to sites where there's active water management, where there's levees and diking to control water, and having kind of a gradient of sites across there where you could do research tied to restoration. And then we also wanted to capture what we're calling a nutrient gradient. And that is from high nutrients, so water that has a lot of nutrients coming off of agriculture and heavy land uses coming in from the Fox River, meeting low nutrient water coming in from Lake Michigan. And the reason for that is that kind of difference in how much nutrients are in the water can influence fisheries, other microorganisms. A lot of things are tied up with nutrients, so we wanted to have kind of another built-in scientific gradient there. So with that in mind, and a kind of variety of processes, we looked at all these public lands across the whole estuary and what lands would suit this. We only evaluated lands that were already public, that already had public access, and where there was willing partners to become part of this designation. The university, so UW Green Bay, where I work, will be the state lead on this, but we won't be taking ownership or management of any land. All that kind of stays with the people who own it now. We just bring additional resources, some planning expertise, and kind of school groups, people out to use those sites, and long-term research. So we eventually settled on these three, what we're calling them, natural area components. There's a big section in Peshtigo that represents our kind of undisturbed, I'm not even going to use the word pristine because in the Great Lakes that doesn't make sense, but undisturbed ecosystem, a large river mouth going into the bay. We have a big lower bay site, which is where there's a lot more active management of those lands in terms of control of water levels, invasive removal. That is the other end of that restoration gradient. And then we have property in Sturgeon Bay between Crossroads and the Door County Land Trust and a bit of DNR land. And this variety of lands represents 37,000 acres, which will be the biggest NERR in the Great Lakes, by I think almost double the size of Lake Superior. 10,000 land acres and 20,000 open water. So it's a significant kind of size to start off when we are first getting our feet wet with managing something of this size. What I'm very excited about is the number of partners. So this table here is a list of all of the lands included in the designation. The biggest partner is the Wisconsin DNR with 81% of lands, 8,000 acres. But Door County Land Trust is number 3 on that list with 400 acres. So this is just an exciting between land trust, the county, the city of Green Bay, two land trust, Crossroads, the school district. There's a lot of different potential relationships and knowledge sharing and shared resources to bring together through the NERR umbrella. And this is just, I think this diversity is pretty unique for the reserve system. From what I've come across so far, I haven't seen any reserve that has that diverse type of member land partners. Oh, and I just wanted to zoom in on Sturgeon Bay because we're here to show you what properties are included. And the reason we included Sturgeon Bay, it gave us an additional east. So we know that water kind of flows in from the west and then goes up the east shore. We wanted to have some of that east shore representation. We also wanted shorter watersheds between Strawberry Creek and Crossroads. Yeah, Big Creek, right? Here we are at Big Creek. So different types of watersheds. We wanted to connect to population in Sturgeon Bay, potentially all up to Door County, and also visitor populations that come through, and have kind of new connections with school districts in the county too. So yeah, it was important to bring in the Sturgeon Bay component as well. Oh, and plus very unique habitat, some dune habitat in Door County Land Trust property. This map shows the hash lines indicate what's called core areas, and then buffer areas around it. And, oh, they're both hashed, but one direction's core and one area is buffer. This is a somewhat arbitrary starting designation for us, where core areas are where we do intense work, and then the buffer area is protective area around it. But we'll be in contact and touch with Door County Land Trust and Crossroads about what kind of work we'd want to partner with on it's their land, so nothing changes there, just potential partnerships. And as hopefully I've already said this before, programmatically, our partnerships are not, I just talked about boundaries and sites, and that's all great, but programmatically the footprint is quite large for the NERR. Once we're designated, we have to pick some sub-watersheds to work in. The Green Bay watershed is large. So we want to pick priority watersheds where we might do some upland, upwater work, because we know that things that happen in the bay and in the water, or open waters, originate upland. So we'll be picking some sub-watersheds to work in. Okay, so now this is a bit more kind of new. I'm still learning this as I go too, but here are some of the opportunities that come with designation. These are both kind of system-wide things as we're tapping into this national system, and what we hope to implement locally. So in blue is the words research, education, stewardship, and training. Every reserve across the U.S. that's kind of the four focus areas. So there is programs in each of those focus areas locally, but then also your staff are part of national conversations about research, education, stewardship, and training. And I think that's exciting for us, that kind of bringing Green Bay, again, Green Bay's story, what's happening in Door County, what's happening in Sturgeon Bay, to national conversations about estuary health around the U.S. Research, which is key and a kind of a foundational program, has 3 programs I'm going to talk about: the system-wide monitoring program, the NERR Science Collaborative, and a fellowship program. Education, another foundational program, has a big focus on teacher training, and then K through 12 place-based education. Stewardship and training are very kind of locally driven, in that training is there to meet local needs. It could be something like capacity building, help with grant writing, building a community of practice around a topic, whether it be kind of flooding or shoreline infrastructure, traditional kind of one-off trainings, things like that. It's very much focused on science-based decision-making, so helping decision makers, resource professionals, use the data collected at estuaries, at NERRs, to help inform their decision-making. So for example, the East River Collaborative, which Mike's been working on that. It's a great project, potentially expanding those efforts if there's a desire, or mimicking them in other water systems. Just an idea, lots of potential for what the NERR can do. So I'll talk about these now, these different programs. So the system-wide monitoring program, this is really, I think, the bread and butter of what the reserve system does. This is a national program, and where the data is going to contribute to NOAA, the federal agency's understanding of the national health of estuaries across the U.S. So essentially, it's like a pulse check on how are our wetlands and estuaries doing, and now we'll contribute Door County and Green Bay's estuary data to that. It provides, what I think is significant, is baseline and significant support financially and equipment-wise. Many grant programs will not always support long-term baseline monitoring work. This program will, where there's a suite of samples that are collected by every reserve to look at both short-term variability and long-term changes in water quality, biological systems, how land is used, changes in land cover, aquatic vegetation. And really the big purpose here is informing effective coastal management issues both locally and then at a national scale, because you have this same data set, the same suite of samples collected across the US. This is from the Lake Superior Reserve, where they focus, on the St. Louis River estuary system, but just an example. And this is monthly, or at least monthly in the summer, spring and fall, maybe not quite as much if there's ice cover in the winter, but a suite of samples. And you have a dedicated technician working towards this. There is a fair amount of water quality work, this type of sampling already happening between EPA and the Wisconsin DNR and other organizations through both citizen science work and others. So we would want to, and we will in our planning process, think about where are sites that aren't being already targeted by those other organizations. Where are there gaps in data? We don't want to duplicate what's already happening. We want the NERR to be an additive force in the region. So that, as part of our management plan process, we'll be talking with agencies and other sampling folks to see where's the holes that the NERR could fill in. And then all of our data go to a national database center for all these 30 reserves across the US. This is something I'm very excited about. This is the NERR Science Collaborative. So this is dedicated federal funding that only goes to the reserve system. So currently, well, in 2022, it was $3 million across the 17 reserves. And this supports science towards coastal decision making. Right now, it's managed by the University of Michigan via an agreement with NOAA, so federal dollars. And it comes in 3 different buckets, and we'll have access to this right away. One is collaborative projects. So this is where reserve staff work with their partners, so Crossroads, Door County Land Trust, other partners in their local system, to do science that address coastal management needs. Examples of recent projects: in the Lake Superior Reserve had a protecting wetlands one, which relevant here. Old Woman Creek, which is the reserve on Lake Erie, had a quantifying nutrient retention by coastal wetland project. I'm sure there's a lot of management challenges that we could think of to address collaboratively in our system, and we'd have access to these dollars for that. There is a bucket for science transfer grants, which helps transfer knowledge both among reserves across the US and then also to their coastal communities. Again, this is partnering with your local land partners like the Trust and Crossroads. An example of one which I would love to see here, kind of a cultural ecosystem services one. So thinking about the reasons beyond just the ecological reasons that people value places that they recreate around water towards stewardship and management. Refining techniques for looking at chlorophyll, which is an important component of understanding harmful algal blooms. And then the third bucket is capacity building, and this is helping, and I think this helps especially when reserves work in more rural areas. It helps build infrastructure to do collaborative science. So that could be helping supply video conferencing to a rural area that doesn't have it, or developing trainings to help kind of build capacity with partners. So this is an exciting pot of money that we'll have access to that's exclusively for reserves and as they partner with their local land groups. Okay, education. So this is the second pillar of the acronym is REST, Research, Education, Stewardship, and Training. Education is the second. There are national programs and then kind of both local. So we are required to do something called Teachers on the Estuary, which is a field-based teacher workshop. Each reserve hosts these every summer. Some reserves, like the one in Ohio, I think they do like 6 to 8 a summer. Lake Superior does, I think, 3 or 4. You can attract both local teachers and national teachers who want to come learn about your system. And the focus is on building kind of connections for year-round learning. So there's a lot of support to scaffold what you learn in the summer to the rest of the classroom, the rest of the year. It is based on incorporating your local ecosystem into your teaching, and it's for K through 12 teachers. So this, I think, is exciting too, the idea that we'll have teachers come for 2 weeks at a time for really hands-on learning, and then support that learning as they go back to their local classrooms. Education also can take the form of working closely with classrooms. There's a program at the Lake Superior Reserve called Rivers to Lakes, where they partner with one school throughout a whole year, and then every month those students come out to do water sampling, testing for fish, and kind of other suites of samples, and they bring that back to their classroom. So really integrating the reserve and the NERR sites into a classroom, teaching throughout a whole year. And that, I love that idea of that integrated classroom work and that partnership potential. Training is a big part of the reserve system. We will have access to a NOAA federal program called the Margaret Davidson Fellowship, where every reserve gets a graduate fellow from either a local university or a different university can come here. It's paid for by NOAA. 2 years of funding focused on reserves addressing key management needs. So they are there to help address whatever kind of a local ecosystem management concern is. In the current cohort is that Tyner. He's looking at the potential impacts of climate change on water quality in a large freshwater estuary, completely relevant to the work we're doing in Green Bay. So this is exciting to kind of bring some national student training opportunities to us here locally. And I think a really cool thing I've seen reserves do is be platforms and conveners for learning. So last week I was in Duluth, or in Superior, Wisconsin. I was attending the Lake Superior Reserve's St. Louis River Summit. This was their 14th year, and it's a platform for sharing data about the St. Louis River estuary and Lake Superior, coming up with ideas for future funding requests, kind of collaboration, and creating a forward direction for where your community wants to go around water. One thing I especially liked about this meeting was it was single track, so that means there was 350 people. We were all sitting there kind of watching the same presentations, and it would range from an EPA presentation about the history, kind of recreating the ecosystem history of the St. Louis River estuary to help inform restoration, to a kind of like a slam poetry display about citizens just kind of speaking poetry about the estuary. That kind of variety of citizens and research professionals, and the mayor of Superior was there. I love that the NERRs can be places for that, and I really want to see us do something like that in Green Bay, kind of a platform for that shared learning and exchange, especially where it's not just science focused or not kind of just one thing or the other, but it becomes a shared space. I think in Green Bay in particular, kind of thinking about the future of post-designation. So we've cleaned up the Fox River to an extent. We've done work on the Menominee River. We have this active restoration with the lower Green Bay area of concern. What happens next? We also know that we are sitting on an abundance of fresh water. As the kind of changes in weather and climate change impacts, what does that mean economically, socially, for us as a region? And that can be a place that the NERR can help convene on, is this kind of, what does it mean to be close to so much abundant fresh water? So a lot of potential there as a convening force for the region around water. Also kind of a front door to information and access. I wanted to give an example of stewardship. So stewardship, which is another pillar of the reserve, looks different at every site. This is the most, I think, site-specific of the 4 programs. Something else I gleaned from the Lake Superior Reserve is they recently did a project with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLFWIC, to create this guide of using kind of native plants and traditional knowledge from the Ojibwe to help us understand how to create coastal ecosystems that are really adapted to change and to bluff erosion and other kind of changes that happen along our system. A work with communities, tribal communities, is a big focus of the NERR system. In our reserve, Chairman Hill of the Oneida Nation serves on is on our steering committee. We work with the Menominee Nation and more with the Ho-Chunk. There's a big focus on tribal engagement, and I'm excited to see the Lake Superior NERR leading this too, so a lot to learn there. Another stewardship example, I was at the Jacques Cousteau Reserve in New Jersey in the fall for the National NERR meeting. This is a citizen science example. They had this amazing 32-year study and if you've done citizen science work, you can understand 32 years is a huge investment in a study of bridge netting, where I think it's like maybe once a week or so, volunteers, NERR staff, graduate students go out and capture larval fish in plankton nets as it's coming in with the incoming high tide. This is a picture, these are very amateur pictures that I took of where the sampling happens, but a 32-year data set is so amazing. And then grad students and volunteers are working to collect, sort, and ID these larval fish. So that is just like when you have an investment of a NERR in a place for 40 years, you can do these really, really long-term data sets. I'm thinking about working with Karen maybe on some of your sucker work and really investing in a place, which you can't always get with kind of short-term funding bursts. So that's a cool thing. The year before the National NERR meeting was at the Padilla Bay Reserve. That's one of the oldest reserves. It's on Puget Sound in Washington State. What I wanted to highlight here was their visitor center. They had just redone it when we arrived with touch tanks. They had octopus and sea anemones, all these species that are local to the Puget Sound. Also, the facility is like a campus. Like you feel like you're at a university's research campus with multiple buildings. There's a dive locker, there's wet and dry labs, there's a children's library area in the corner. So when you've been around for a while and you have a lot of community investment, you can have a campus like this. But it was cool to see the future of what our reserve can be with time and really being a destination for research and education. Okay, to give you an idea of the staffing, because kind of who works there helps inform what the reserve does, we are required by NOAA to have a coordinator position for education, a coordinator position for research, and a director. So 3 required positions. Once you have funding and that's filled, you also staff a training professional and a stewardship professional. So essentially you have a lead on each of those 4 sectors: research, education, stewardship, and training. Our goal would be to have funding and support to have all those positions filled right away from the jump. And then we've also secured funding from the state of Wisconsin, the tribal gaming funds, to hire a position this year, even before designation, for a tribal engagement coordinator. So this is a position helping us work directly with tribes to plan programs in tribal schools, especially a focus on Oneida at first, and to have that kind of strong First Nations engagement. So we're really excited about that potential and thankful for the state for supporting that work. Oh, I didn't mention that funding. So this is a 70-30 match where we get 70% of funds from the federal government, from appropriations, and then 30% through state match on that, university match. But yeah, essentially we'll have a whole new crop of folks working in the region on the estuary, which is just exciting too. We're trying to dream big, though, also beyond just what our core positions have to be. I mentioned our holistic vision for the NERR, where we want to really incorporate arts and storytelling and music into the work we do. So I'd love to have a director of art and culture to help us bring that to life. We also know that the watershed is critical. Like I said before, nothing happens in the bay without happening in the watershed up first. So having a coordinator that can help work in the watershed, that's important too. We've been saying for a while that we want to be the most technologically advanced reserve in the whole national system. I think the university already partners with Cellcom and Microsoft and Titletown Tech on technology initiatives, so this doesn't seem like it would be a stretch. I was talking to the person at NOAA who's in charge of all of the research programs across the whole reserve, and he mentioned that they're really looking towards sensor technology and incorporating more sensor work into the work that reserves do. That is something that UWGB is currently engaged in with Cellcom and Exonis, a technology company. So we see ourselves we can position ourselves in the Green Bay system to really develop technologies that are sensor focused and apply that across the national system. And then some sort of kind of collaboration position that really is focused on translating science into application. The Green Bay system and Door County I probably never worked in a system that that is so collaborative. There are so many great agencies and folks doing great work, and we don't want to duplicate those efforts. So we want to harness that power and be like kind of an additive force to what's already happening. And that's just great to come into a system that's so supportive. Okay, we are currently about to work officially, but we've been doing some behind the scenes work on our first management plan. And this is the guiding force for what the NERR will be in the first few years. So far, the steering committee for the NERR has been working on our strategic plan. I mentioned the mission a few minutes ago. We've developed some priority coastal management issues I'll share in a second. Our next big work, and where I'll be in touch with Sam and Emily here at Door County Land Trust, is looking at our foundational programs. So what is the NERR going to do day to day within those research, education, stewardship, and training sectors? Where are the needs in the community? Where are opportunities? What kind of capacity already exists? Where can we fill in those gaps? So the two green outlines are where we're going to look for the most public feedback, both the foundational programs and then the resource protection plan and our public access and visitor use plan. You'll see at the bottom, there is a land acquisition plan. So NOAA asks us to think about, if you're going to expand over time, where might you put more, if you wanted to bring in additional partners or additional land, where would those lands be? And that is just to start thinking about, what else would be a good asset to bring into your reserve system. So we'll be thinking about that too, is what the future of the reserve could look like in 15 or 20 more years. These plans are revisited every 5 years, so there's a chance to reassess where you're at and think about what are the new ecosystem needs, community needs in your system. I'm sharing these now. These are what our steering committee has identified as our draft coastal management issues. They're quite broad, but we're trying to think of things that are locally specific, so what's very important, significant to Green Bay and Sturgeon Bay and our systems here, but also with lessons to learn for the US. So the first one is preparing Great Lakes communities for long-term ecosystem change and variability, both climate change and change from fluctuating water levels and kind of change because of land use. How is that going to impact our local ecosystem? Our second one is restoring sustainable land-water connections. This is tied up with restoration and all the restoration work. So what does it look like moving forward with all the wetland work happening to really have strong land-water connections at landscape level? The third one is preserving biodiversity through improved ecological integrity and ecosystem resiliency. Here we're thinking about invasive species, what that means for systems, how to encourage a lot of native species, the movement of native fish like pike and other fish that move from land to water, very kind of organism focused there. And the fourth one, and this is where my personal history and research lies the most, is thinking about the Bay of Green Bay's connection to quality of life and sense of place. As I mentioned, if you're in this room, you, I'm sure, have an appreciation for the Bay. If you live in Door County, you have an appreciation for the Bay. That is wonderful. We want to kind of instill lots of that sense of stewardship and love across the region, both visitors and kind of people who live here in the long haul, thinking about new populations that might be coming to the region, both from kind of transplants and if there's going to be kind of a big climate migration shift up to Door County and to Green Bay system, all that. So thinking about kind of economic, ecological, human dimensions aspects of this work. Within each of these coastal management issues, we have goals and objectives and actions. So what we're going to be doing in the next year through conversations with partners, including folks in this room, is thinking about where is there kind of a complete gap in either research or outreach activities, and then where is there already work that the NERR can help shepherd and help kind of bring to another level. So that's our big priorities for the next year. And these are our guiding management issues driving us. The timeline. This is our full timeline from starting in 2016 when it was actually a group in Door County that brought the idea to our university about having a kind of a place-based science program, and through a grant from Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, we landed on this NERR idea. I started in 2020, as I mentioned. I could kind of pick up the work full-time, and we've been working diligently since then. It is a long process, as you can see. Working with the federal government can take a while, but it's deliberative. There's a lot of public feedback involved, a lot of outreach like this, so we really want to get it right and do it the right way, even if it takes time. In January of this past year, we had a kind of a big milestone for us. NOAA accepted the nomination from the state for those natural area sites you saw. And that lifted the gate, and we can now move forward with our two big goals this year, writing our management plan and writing our environmental impact statement. Next week, on Tuesday, officials from NOAA will be on campus with us. We are hosting both a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting to introduce the environmental impact statement and what that means, and to take public comment on the proposed natural areas. I invite you to attend either of these meetings and offer comment if you want. There is also a way to offer comment to NOAA directly, and I can give you that information after the meeting as well. Our goal is to submit our environmental impact statement and management plan the end of 2024, the end of this year, and then NOAA has some time to do paperwork, and we have to do MOUs with all of our land partners like Door County Land Trust and Crossroads, and then we're working towards having a designation in spring of 2025. If we can time it to the visibility of the draft, that would be pretty amazing, but we'll see what we can do. With all those cameras on Green Bay and the area, it'd be nice to also celebrate the NERR. And ideally, we'll have federal funding in FY26, so starting in July, we could start funding positions. That's the dream, is if we kind of kept on time. This is our goal. I'll say that we are so thankful for regional enthusiasm, especially here in Door County. So thanks to the mayor and Mark for harnessing some of that. This is my second, I think, presentation I've done in Door County, in Sturgeon Bay in the last couple of years. Lots of letters of support from this region. In the last couple of years, I've done 128 presentations. I've talked to over 2,400 community members. We've gotten resolutions of support. That means a lot to NOAA. When they're looking for community support when they're going to decide where a NERR is going to be and approve that. And so I thank this community for backing the NERR and showing the federal government and others locally that this is a big deal and is meaningful to your area. So thank you for all that commitment. I'll just end before questions. This is our website. We have a newsletter there. It's very small, I'm sorry. There's a Get Involved tab there, and it links to our newsletter. I send out a few notes a year just to keep you updated on what's going on, so join the newsletter. This is my email address to stay engaged with me directly. And I hope to be back in a year and a half and celebrating the designation with you all. But thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. Oh, Mark, do you want to help? Yeah, I'm gonna take some water.
I do? Oh, okay.
Because you're also on camera, on Zoom.
Oh, okay. On the slide that you showed where there was a core area that had the slash marks one way and another area with the slash marks the other way, it was impossible to tell what's what. Can you tell what is Crossroads' role and what is the Door County Land Trust role?
Yes, so good, totally legitimate question. It is impossible to tell from this slide. We need to work on this. And we're actually still figuring out what this means. So core and buffer is something that NOAA asked us to designate. They told me, this is their words, it's largely an academic exercise. But what it means, I think, we were forced to do it, is that in core areas, it's where you'd expect to have your most focused research. Like if you put equipment in, you don't expect it to move over time because there won't be kind of land moving activities or major changes. There is only a little bit of core in Sturgeon Bay, because you have to have a certain amount of buffer around it acre-wise, and there we just don't have enough Sturgeon Bay property for that. But I think we put core in right at the mouth of the Big Creek and Strawberry Creek, like right where the estuary, those waterways meet the Sturgeon Bay cut. In the buffer, if there's going to be active restoration, that's great. It just kind of gives you protection around your long-term focused research. These are still draft forms. I haven't even talked to Emily or Sam or their staff about these yet. We had to get something on a map for NOAA, and we'll talk more about them if that makes sense for local. But across our whole here and Lower Bay and Peshtigo, most of our core is around where rivers meet the waterway, and then protecting that buffer. That's where you'd put your long-term monitoring.
I cannot read the key.
The only core on this map is where Big Creek, the green area around Big Creek.
Well, it has to do with the angle of the lines too, right?
Right. Oh, no, there's some core here. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, there's core.
So there's core here and there's core there. With the lines are going this way, that's buffer. The lines are going this way, that's core. Right?
Yeah, and those lines, totally hard to see. This map was made to emphasize who the property owners were and not what core and buffer is. We have a different map that's better with core and buffer, which I'm happy to share with you. It will evolve over time. Yeah, but good question for what that means.
More questions? Rob's got that side, I got
All right,
this side.
thanks. My question relates to the state-federal partnership and the one state limit in terms of that kind of partnership. And I was just thinking of the bay, you know, the upper part of the Bays de Noc up there, there's really some wetland types and a certain kind of gradient that isn't present in the lower part of the bay. So, you know, having that, and I know it won't be in the Green Bay NERR, but I think about also the St. Louis River estuary with Minnesota and Wisconsin. And why, what's the history of that? Why do we have just one state partnering with the federal government?
Yeah, so yeah, Mike asked just about, the state partnership part of that, especially like St. Louis, the Lake Superior NERR is at the Minnesota, the Duluth Superior border. We're here at the Michigan-Wisconsin border. History, I don't know. I think that part of it is like a management, kind of easier to work with one state, because everything has to be advanced through the governor, and so it's a little bit easier to advance it through one governor than two. I'll say Chesapeake Bay, which is a huge estuary, has a NERR in Virginia, and then a whole different NERR in Maryland. And they're covering a huge geographic area. I was talking to someone from the University of Michigan, Jen Reed. She mentioned possibly engaging tribal groups in the UP for kind of bringing on another NERR or affiliate up there. So for management-wise, I think it's state, but programmatically, like I've done presentations in Menominee, and I'd love to see us work in the UP because water has no boundaries. It is meaningless to water and ecosystems. So the arbitrary state boundaries are just like a logistics thing. Yeah.
Just following up on Mike's comment, I mean, Little Bay de Noc is a rich estuary unto its own. What about Menominee, Marinette Menominee, the river in that estuary?
Right, so that's also a significant estuary, and the Menominee, like I said, was recently delisted as an area of concern, but the story doesn't end there. There's still a lot of work to do on the Menominee River. We evaluated area property in Marinette, like Seagull Bar, which is DNR owned, and looked at the estuary mouth there. Because we had this large component in Peshtigo and we were trying to kind of keep our footprint manageable at first, it wasn't ultimately included in the designation. But the university does work. We do wild rice seeding around there, so we'll be working in that system. And I think over time, potentially that might be a good place for expansion, is that river growth. It just, because the Peshtigo is right there, we had to make some cuts at some point about size. But yeah, interesting system, and it's a beautiful river, and it'd be great to work there. And lots of fisheries and kind of world-class fishery too. Do you have a question? Yeah.
You have to excuse me a little bit. I'm pretty much a neophyte compared to the people that have already asked questions. But I just didn't quite follow your talk. I know Sturgeon Bay and Peshtigo and Green Bay are competing or have applied for the physical structure of a NERR.
Yeah, let me clarify that. There's, between those three sites, well, they're all included, their natural areas are all included. That's not, yeah. Location of the physical structure, the built infrastructure, that is, we have not made any action on that or movement on that at this point for a few reasons. Early in the process, we thought we would be doing them as simultaneous things. I think I probably expressed that to you even, Mark, early on. We learned over time a few things. One is NOAA advises you to wait until you finish designation. Otherwise, it can look a little bit pre-decisional to start putting in a building before you've achieved designation. Two, the management plan, which is what we're working on this next year, which is focused on writing your management issues and your goals and objectives. You want your location to reflect where your management priorities are and the work you're going to do. And then three was, the EIS process. Even though those sites have been, these natural area sites have been accepted by NOAA, during the environmental impact statement process, which we're working on right now and we're being launched next week, those aren't finalized until NOAA says they're final after the EIS process. So there could still be some changes in boundaries. So we want to wait till all of that's finalized before putting a decision about a visitor center down.
But then you transitioned into Green Bay with organizational charts and plans and goals and all of that that's going on with the NERR already. So I'm just, excuse me, the whole sequence here is still foggy to me.
So this one right here, this chart, and
and the organizational chart.
Yeah, so the University of Wisconsin Green Bay is the lead state agency. The staff members will be UW Green Bay employees, but the built infrastructure can be anywhere. Just because they're university employees doesn't mean they have to be on the campus. So that, who their employer is will be the university, but that's not tied geographically to a certain location.
Okay, I guess that's news. Thank you.
Other questions?
What does it mean for additional land protection in Door County and the Southern Door area? When more land is protected and it's along the shoreline, will it then become a part of the NERR?
Right, so right now those boundaries that we've proposed, those are that map with the boundaries, that's what the state's proposing as the ideal location for now. If Door County Land Trust expands over time, that new land won't automatically be part of the reserve, but when we go up to do a boundary expansion, we would talk with the trust about, does this property make sense for inclusion at this time? So for example, like the village of Howard acquired land that was privately held right next to it, adjacent to in Duck Creek. And that happened, that process, they acquired that land right after we finished setting those boundaries. So it would have made a lot of sense to include it, but because we had already finished the process, NOAA said, no, you need to wait until you go through another boundary expansion in the future to include it. So we would, through the process of writing this management plan, we would talk to the Door County Land Trust and say, you are thinking like this is gonna become a new property. Maybe we should write that in as part of the long-term plan. It wouldn't come up until we do a boundary expansion, and there has to be a good reason to take, is there a new ecosystem that you want to bring in? Does it bring in a new type of research potential? But if it's there, then we can expand the boundaries to meet that.
Maybe a little bit more.
One more thing is, there's a lot of interest in having a lot of land in the reserve, which we're so pleased about. Because it's the first time that we are taking on a NERR, and the university is new to this, we put some limits instead of just saying any kind of public land makes sense. We had to constrain ourselves no matter the size of your reserve, if you're a 500-acre reserve like in Ohio, or you're 38,000 like we're proposing, you all get the same budget from the federal government. It's about $1.25 million. 700,000 of that is federal appropriation. So we have to think about how far can we stretch those dollars. So we tried to constrain ourselves by what is manageable at first. What can we take on? So yeah, we don't get a bigger slice of the pie because you have more land included.
And to add a little bit more perspective, the site selection committee actually looked at 9 different areas throughout Green Bay, all the way from Washington Island, all the way up around to Marinette. And it included Chambers Island. So they've considered all those and then settled on 4 or 3 preferred areas, correct?
Yeah.
So it's not like they haven't thought of elsewhere. It's just for this context and to get
This
started.
timing, yeah, exactly.
It was like, let's just focus on this area for the reasons that she said.
Yeah, so we applied criteria and spent about a year looking at these 9 sites in 2022. We settled on the 3 we ended up with. But because we've evaluated these and we know that they're high potential, maybe over time this could make some sense bringing some of these in.
I think it'd help people to understand that to get the NERR site, somebody had to go after it, right? Somebody had to say to the federal government, we want a NERR. Could you,
Sure.
Do you know that story, and can you tell that story? Because that leads you to that organization chart and the fact that the university.
Good point.
The university is the one that brought that here.
Good point, yeah, thanks, Mayor Ward. Well, 2 things had to happen at once. There had to be local interest, so there had to be an organization willing to say, we are gonna go through a 8-year process and pay and put the money in to have someone work on this for 8 years. And NOAA had to say, we want to see a new reserve come to the Great Lakes. And those 2 things happened at the same time. The national system wanted to expand. They wanted to have another freshwater reserve. Green Bay was on their radar. And then going back to so that was happening in the kind of mid-2010s, 2015 or so. Group in Door County, maybe it was you guys, approached the university with an interest, knowing I think that you couldn't just have probably a land trust. It might be too big for Door County Land Trust to take on as an organizational lead, but a DNR or a university could take on this effort. They got funding from the state to explore what could something like this look like? Where could you have a hub of research and education and teaching? Caitlin Olson got that. I think she was a citizen in Door County. She spent a year exploring who could be the managing entity, what would a facility look like, what could programs look like. The university settled on this program, this NERR program, and then spent 3 years gathering community support for both a reserve and for the university to lead that effort. A first letter came from the Oneida Nation, Chairman Hill. Congressman Gallagher wrote a letter. I think I saw a letter from Sturgeon Bay in there. Senator Baldwin wrote a letter. So there was a lot of letters of support, but it was the university saying, we'll step up and take this initiative on, and then NOAA saying, yes, we want to have one of these in the Great Lakes. And Mayor Ward, you might know more than me if I've missed a step in there.
No, I think you hit it exactly. But the point is the university has the administrative moxie, so to speak, to deal with not only the federal government, but the state government, plus its own bureaucracy, if I can call it that.
Yeah, that's fair. as you know. Yeah. So the Lake Superior Reserve, their state partner is UW Extension. In Ohio, it is Wisconsin DNR. So often it's going to be your state's DNR or a big university. In fact, that we are a regional comprehensive is kind of unique. Rutgers is the one in New Jersey. University of Texas is the one in Texas. Extension, so we're kind of small player in that way, but we're punching above our weight in terms of going for one of these.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't understand. It's a small but growing university.
Yes.
But there aren't many like that have one of these.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Mayor.
Under the land acquisition part of the plan, is there already funding set aside to acquire property, and who would manage this ultimately?
Good question. So yeah, under the land acquisition part of that, is there funding? Is there funds? So NOAA has a pot of money called Procurement, Acquisition, and Construction. It's not a huge pot of money. It can do things like help your partners, again, the land trust, build a boardwalk. It could be to expand your building a bit. It can be used to acquire land, but there has to be a big match because they do not want to see like a lot of their money going towards land purchases. The university, I'm not going to speak for the university, but we are unlikely to purchase new land. It would more go towards DNR, Crossroads, whoever is already wanting to make a purchase, and we could help put a small, contribution towards that. It's not going to cover the whole thing. But yeah, there's some small amounts of pots of money, as long as we can do a match on it.
Yeah, I'm excited about the fact that Sturgeon Bay has submitted a proposal to be the site for the visitor center. Has there been any evaluations or any movement on that, or do you have a target date?
I know this is going to be frustrating to hear, but no movement. We have received the brochure, and it's beautiful.
It is.
It's sitting in my office, and it's sitting in my colleagues' offices. We're basically until we are very close to designation is when we'll start taking action. So I don't even want to give a date. I'm sorry about that. I don't want to be held to a date, but we have received the brochure.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And I'll say one more thing about built infrastructure. Like I said before, we're going to get the same amount of money no matter if we have 5 buildings or 1. So I think it makes a lot of sense for us to harness existing buildings too. So we want to be thinking about where is there already nature centers, things that doing the work of the NERR, and can they help serve as branches or satellite locations or things like that. So that's going to be part of the consideration as well.
Hang on, Kevin, I'm coming.
Yes. How is it going to be determined where the visitor center is going to be located and what's all going to be in it?
Yeah, okay, so I didn't say this yet. Everything we've done so far has had a heavy hand from NOAA, like from the federal government. We were given criteria to select those natural area sites. We had to go through steps of public approval. We have this public scoping meeting next week. So lots of kind of like, this is what you're gonna do, here's criteria, you can modify it a bit. The visitor center it's not the same heavy-handedness from the federal government. There's no criteria, they don't set a standard for how you do that. It will ultimately be a university decision with criteria. That criteria hasn't been set yet. And then, the university will decide what that's gonna look like, that process will look like, but we haven't made that decision yet. It's helpful, I think, that it's not federally guided, that we can make the best holistic decision for our region.
Any other questions?
No, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, so I work for the Door County Land Trust. There is a stretch of land that goes from about Kangaroo Lake all the way up north to the tip of the peninsula that's designated as Ramsar Wetlands of International Significance. That designation doesn't carry with it any kind of financial funding or any grants to the organizations that protect land in that area, but it does carry with it just that credential of having a designation. And I think that if the NERR thinks about areas where they do want to focus funding, which you've already identified, but the possibility of also designating other areas of importance, even if they're not areas where funding would be directed, that just having that designation from NERR could be an additional feather in our cap for further land protection work.
Yeah, I agree with you that we're not going to take on every single piece of important land, just we can't. But there's so much interesting habitat from Ramsar Wetland here. I think Katie Belfast at the Wisconsin Wetland Association was telling me up near Peshtigo there might be trying for a Ramsar designation. Cat Island in the Lower Bay, which is a really active, interesting restoration site for now, that can't be part of the NERR. So we thought about this, is there a way to say, this is important, it's not part of the NERR, but it's important, beyond just saying, that's a partner. And I've been thinking about that, so let me get back to you, because there's a lot of value in that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And we'll talk more.
Any other questions? Well, I can assure you that there's lots of interest in the Door County area for the
I can
NERR.
tell, yeah.
And maybe about a visitor center too. And if anybody here hasn't seen our prospectus that we provided to them, which you could use as a pattern of criteria, but there's a display copy back here, or you could go on the city's website and search for NERR. It'll come to the NERR webpage, and there's a link there to our prospectus. We think it's very well done and puts our best foot forward. So if you haven't seen it, you should look it up. And so anyway, what a great presentation, and look what we learned. Let's give her a bit of applause.